John Ballinger and Eric Buchanan. How are you both doing today, sirs?
Fantastic.
Great.
Well, let me do this. I've had John on by himself several times to talk about insurance, the payroll protection program. I've had Eric on several times to talk about building a business as far as processes, systems, structures, some rugby from time to time. But this is I have you both together for a specific reason. And we are in the process of developing kind of a new video series, which will transition over to a podcast format, I'm sure, quickly. But we want to do this a little sooner rather than later. So we're going to maybe shoot first and then aim, as Clint would do. You guys are military. Y'all learned to aim first. But we're going to start talking about things that are very relevant to today's world, but we're going to look back a little bit and talk about the history of the United States in a different perspective, I think. It's going to encompass a bunch of stuff. But before we get down that road, this conversation reflected one I had with John and a bunch I've been having with Eric. John, just let people know about that phone call. What started this whole thing?
So, Thanks first, Eric and Clint. Really, it's because of the pain our country's in. That's when I would do a podcast with you on PPP or meet with a client and talk about lawsuits they were in or insurance claims and just the state of the country and business owners and the pain that they were going through. It just kept being just impressed on me that a lot of the reasons that the things that were happening inside businesses and consumers' life was because of the ignorance of understanding where we're at today and how we got here. And being a military guy, I am obviously patriotic, but I think patriotism gets thrown around too much. And most people think that you got to be draped in the flag and you've got to bleed red, white, and blue and things like that. But the reality is patriotism is supporting your government and supporting what's going on in your country. And you can only do that, in my opinion, if you feel like you're being led well and you understand the premises for being patriotic to your country. And I just saw that degrading, and my desire to do something started when I saw the ultrasound for my 9-year-old daughter. I'm an older dad, and I had 2 boys that are now 30 and 25, and I've got a 9-year-old. And I remember that ultrasound heartbeat. And as a man, I automatically correlated my age at that time with her age of graduation.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that ultrasound, I saw myself at her graduation. And then as she started getting 1, 2, 3, society was getting worse as she was getting older. And I said, you know what? Before dirt gets kicked on my grave, I've got to do something to try and give her the same opportunity that I had to start my companies and live the American dream, so to speak. So that's really where it came from.
Well, and so that reflects a lot of conversations I'd been having with Eric behind the scenes. And I'll just interject. I'll throw this in there. I think one of the ways that you can show patriotism and show support of your country is by having difficult conversations, holding your leadership accountable. Just because you're saying something, and I don't want to say negative, but just because you may be critical of the country you live in through conversation doesn't mean you're not a patriot. That actually, I think, is the ultimate. That, I love you enough as a family member to hold you accountable. I love my country enough to hold it accountable. Now, with that being said, John, you called me up on the phone, and I immediately asked if I could call Eric, because Eric and I over the last month have had, he'll call me and rant for 20 minutes, and then I'll have to apologize because I'll rant back to him for 20 minutes.
I think it's been more than a month, Clint. It's been about the last 6 months. It's actually been the last almost 15 years, 18 years since we first met each other, but it's been more lately.
Well, do me a favor, though. So when I called you up and told you about the conversation I just had with John, you had already mentioned to me several times that we got to find a way to start having these kind of conversations. So you jumped right on it.
Yeah, I'm totally in. John, thank you for having the idea. Clint, thank you for calling me. This, I think, is a fantastic idea. I think the combination of helping business owners, ordinary business employees, people who have a job, understanding how the world works, what their rights are, I think those things are absolutely crucial. But I think generally speaking, Americans uh, need to understand how their country works in order to feel that a country of, by, and for the people is going to work for the people. The premise of America is we were the first country to really try the experiment of self-government back in the 1700s. And self-government relies on the people who are voting, the people who are influencing political opinions, the people who are involved in supporting their government actually understand it enough that we're not being led astray, that we're not letting our government make bad decisions, that we're not letting our government uh, favor one side over the other too much, or pick and choose winners and losers. There's lots of different things that we as responsible citizens, I think, need to know and understand. And if you understand the basic premise of how government works, that's a great start. Understanding the basics of the Constitution, understanding the basic structures, maybe some of the history of how we got here, so you can understand how it affects today's society and today's politics. And I think our country is at a crossroads or at a turning point. The pressure of the coronavirus is creating the extra pressure that's forced some of these issues to come to a head. We need to take the opportunity right now to notice what those things are in our country that we need to work on. Quick, easy things like our education system. There's multiple layers of problems, whether it's simply not educating people well enough to be ready for the job market, whether it's not educating people well enough to understand what their role is in a free society, whether it's not teaching them enough about politics and civics and American history to understand that they do have rights, that they can influence the system, that they can make the system work for them, and just teaching people basic skills about how to be a good citizen. I don't know that we do that anymore. I don't know if we did that well, Clint, when you and I were in high school, but somehow we figured it out. And then there's other life skills that I think are just extremely important that our schools don't teach anymore. You know, how to invest, how to get ahead, how does the economy work for somebody? All those issues that I think we can cover. But if we start with the premise that John's talking about, that we want to have the opportunities for Americans, for his kids, for your kids, for generations to come, we as responsible American citizens need to step up and help explain stuff, continue the education, and answer questions, and help people understand just how wonderful this country is, despite all its flaws, despite its history, that we have made tremendous progress in close to 250 years, and there's no better country in the world, although it's not perfect.
Well, and John, I'll throw it back to you because I've got a couple questions and a couple things I want to cover in this inaugural video, because the formal stuff will start in the next week. I have said it in a very simple way, because you guys are, super, super smart, and I'm super, super something. I'm
At least
super,
you're
super
good looking,
something.
Clint. That's the
Absolutely. I'm the eye candy of the group, of course. Yes, it pays so well. And if I'm the eye candy, we are screwed. But I think whether it's intentional or not intentional, and I think it is intentional, though, I see the bumpers were put up on the American experiment that allowed us the freedom to run into them, to have hard conversations, to navigate the thing called human nature. And because there's never been a perfect society, because human beings are always in charge and human beings are always followers, and human beings are what we are. We come with the good and the bad, just like everybody listening to this down the road or watching this. Your grandparents or your great grandparents, if they were good people, they were good people for the time they lived in. If you transported them from then to now, you would be like, you can't say that, you can't think that, you can't do that. And I just think we look back on it and we hold people to our standards. I think the American experiment has still got a chance to work because of the bumpers they've put up. We can have these kind of conversations. And to say that we haven't come a long way in 200 years and 300 years of trying to put this thing together is just not true. And I'm excited about having conversations like that, because we've all agreed. We've got a list of guests we're going to have on. And just so everybody knows, a lot of the guests, they don't look like us. They don't think like us. They have different perspectives. But here's the one thing they have in common. I hope that we live up to this, is that we have dialogue that is beyond the name calling and the labeling, and we talk about ideas. John, is that not what you see? I mean, isn't that kind of the benefit of this?
Yes, it was an old Army term. Are you going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? And that's stuck with me for decades, working in my own life as well as other lives in my company, is I always wanted to be part of the solution. And I remember having a conversation with Dr. Ben Carson when he was in Chattanooga. And it was right before he stopped practicing and was going to run for president. And he said this to me in downtown Chattanooga. He said, "We need more people in Washington that know how to make decisions and create solutions every day." And he said, "What we're sending to Washington are people that all they want to do is fuss, bicker, and argue all the time, and never come up with real solutions." And he said this, and it really impacted me that day. He said, "I make split-second decisions in the operating room every day that's life and death. I believe I can go to Washington and help form a better way of creating solutions than what's being done up there right now." And I believe that.
I do too. And you know what's weird is and I'm going to use the term "we the people" a lot, but we sit back here and look at the government as this big machine. And we've said this offline before, just us talking. Good people get inside that machine and they get ground up, or they realize I can't maybe make the change I thought I could. I think what we forget is we're part of the same machine. We keep electing the same people. We keep having the same expectations. And I think we've stopped holding ourselves accountable as far as learning about our history, saying the hard things. I don't think all the responsibility lies within them out there in the government. I think most of it, why do we keep giving ourselves the options that we give ourselves?
Well,
we complain,
Clint,
but we keep doing it.
I say this and people get aggravated in it, but I say we're complicit in where we're at as a society. It's our fault.
Absolutely.
So don't be pointing fingers everywhere. Point it back at yourself, because we've allowed to happen what's happened in America.
Can we blame Eric? That's what I want to know. Because if I can blame if it's Eric's fault, then he's got to go fix it. But that's kind of the attitude we have, right, Eric? We elect people and we say, now go fix it. Now we're going to keep sharing and being hateful on Facebook, and we're going to keep holding the other team more accountable than our team, because everything's bad, their fault, everything good's our fault. But we want you to go fix it.
So part of the problem is, I don't think it's an intentional neglect, but what John's pointing out, John's in a position in life where he's done a whole lot of work in his life. And John, just like me, I'm in my early 50s. I spent the last 20 years building a law firm, and we still take great care of our clients, but we've been building businesses. We've been working hard for our clients, for our customers, for the people we're working on, to take care of our employees, to make our lives the best they possibly can be, for providing the service within those businesses to other people. And it's hard to really commit your emotional energy, your physical energy, to doing a good job with all that, and at the same time really pay attention to the level of discourse going on in the country, paying attention to what's going on in the government. And I have a really good friend who I went to law school with that I've been catching up with lately, and he's transitioned careers lately from working in-house for a big medical company to now being a teacher in a university. And he said he read a great book that described the first half of your adult life, you work hard for your success. The second half of your adult life, you work hard for significance. And I think those of us that have been blessed by America, that have been blessed by the opportunities, that have taken advantage of the American opportunities, we're now getting to that point in life where we have an obligation to step up and work on our own significance. And that significance is the opportunity for people like us to actually get engaged, to point out some of these things that are going on, to point out the good and the bad, to talk about what's going on in America. So yeah, is it partly our fault? Sure it is. We were busy building businesses. We were busy taking care of our customers and our clients. We still have to do that. My clients get taken care of every day, and I got to make sure that happens. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to our country. If we're going to be a country that is still self-governed, then people like us need to be involved. Even if it doesn't mean running for office, it just means understanding what's going on so that we can explain to other people and have conversations and educate ourselves and call out things that are not right.
And that means calling them out, John, on both sides, even the people that you support. And I never understood that. Why does everything President Trump or Joe Biden or the Republicans or the Democrat, why does it make me a traitor to my principles if I simply hold people that I support accountable?
Well, there's a great video series that I would recommend that every American watch on History Channel called The Men That Build America. And It is a series of men, whether it's Ford, Morgan Chase, J.P. Morgan. Um, uh, I, I'm trying to think. Rockefeller, Vanderbilt. I mean, it's a group of guys that really pioneered the industrial revolution in America, and and I think at the time those men had good intentions about building. Carnegie with steel and Vanderbilt's with the railroad and logistics, and at the time, I think they really did a great job of building what they've built. However, what's allowed to happen in society is those big corporations today have so much influence on our government through lobbyists that a lot of times, even if the American people want something, if they don't have a lobbyist organization in D.C. lobbying for them, we're just left out in the cold, so to speak.
Yeah. Don't you see this, though? You remember Benjamin Franklin, the quote is, whether it's how true it is or not, what did you, what have you done or what did you build us? And he says, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. That old quote. I think part of what the forefathers saw was this malaise that comes over when you build a life of comfort. I mean, we have built a life of so much convenience now. I mean, this bounces off stuff in space and gets to Eric immediately. I mean, we are so impatient, and our life is so. Oh, it's hot outside. I'm going to go inside. Oh, and I'm hungry. I'm going to open this box. It stays cold all the time, and I'm going to get magic food out of it. And I think we've built this life of comfort so much that we just assumed that everybody kind of felt like everybody else, and we assumed that everything would stay intact because we're so great and we're so free. But again, I think the reason I'm looking forward to these conversations is our forefathers never assumed that. If you listen and read their speeches, they never assumed that what they were doing was guaranteed. Every generation's responsible for handing it off. And I don't think we've done a great job lately.
Well, if I can walk you through World War II to today in about 2 minutes.
Eric will love this.
The men from World War II came home, and when they came home, the wives had to support not only the war machine, that's where Rosie the Riveter came from, they supported the war machine, but they also had to take care of the household. Okay? And so when the men come home, their mindset was, I need to make sure my kids, if they have to go see what I've seen and do what I've done, are strong enough to be able to do it. And that's where I say the hammer and nail mentality of dads and business owners and leaders and managers became, because they needed everybody to be tough. And so my dad's generation was raised by men that were hammer and nails mentality. Mm-hmm. That generation said, you know what? I can't do that to my kids. I want my kids to have better than I got. And so then things got soft and kids were allowed to get away with. Now pass that on to where my generation is right now. We've got so complacent about ensuring that everything was hot, fresh, fast, and now for everything that we do, that this next generation of kids that are coming up past me, so I'll say the 20s and 30s, have no concept of what the struggle is, because the federal government's even said, you can stay on your parents' health insurance till you're 26. Well, I raised my hand and I said, Mr. Government, why did you use 26 as a number? They said, because actuarially, that's when the kid graduates from college, goes back home, gets a job for 4 years, and then finally goes out and signs an apartment lease. And so that's the number we use at 26 years old. I'd already been to war, basic training, all these things, business, but way before I was 26 years old. And they're still couch surfing at 25. And then we expect them to, what we would want to do is stand up and understand, here's where you're at as a society, here's where you need to be engaged at. And when they're not taught civil, anything in the education system that has to do with the civics in society, and they're not taught conflict resolution or interpersonal people skills, look what we've got. And I think those three things are so void in society, which has put us where we're at today.
And Eric, you and I have talked about this too. The other thing, at least from my perspective, that I think, because I lean conservative, but I think as a society, one of the things that we have stopped doing, and maybe we just didn't do that great over the last 20 years, and I'll speak for myself, is I heard people but I wasn't listening. So a lot of times we assume that my perspective about this great country is everybody's perspective. And a lot of times there's been people kind of trying to say for a long time, I love America, but you're the America that you grew up in. I experienced in a different way. And just for myself, I blew right through that. I'm like, hey, that's awesome. At least we love America. And I would move on about my day, not realizing that over the generations, I just wasn't giving that enough credence. I wasn't slowing down long enough to go, wait a minute, what does that mean? And it may mean due to your race. It may mean due to your lifestyle. It may mean how you've been educated. I mean, there are generations, there's kids out there that say things to me. My daughter will tell me stuff that they're learning, or my son will say stuff that he's learning in college. And I go, what? And for years, I just blew right by that. I'm like, that's silly. Well, it's not silly. It's not silly, because now that's kind of become mainstream stuff. But wouldn't you agree, Eric, that listening to people we've got to get better at that, rather than telling people where they're wrong or why we differ, maybe listening and just going, you know what, it's possible. People have lived in the same country and just not experienced it the same way.
So I've read a couple articles lately about restoring the art of the conversation. And it's been very interesting that what's happening now during these lockdowns and encouraging people to stay at home, and more our business meetings are happening online, just like we're doing right here. What else was going on in terms of communication with everybody when they told us to mostly stay home starting in March, and then the rules went into effect, and here we are recording this at the beginning of August. So for the last 5 months or so or more, people have been stuck at home. They're watching TV. They're engaged in social media because that's the way to communicate with other people. And they're not just having conversations with people at church, people at work, with their friends quite so much. And part of the problem, if you're on social media, for example, you are engaged, you're exchanging ideas back and forth, but you're doing it in a limited number of words, a limited number of characters, and there's no nuance in the conversation. There's no give and take. Here's why I'm right and here's why you're wrong. And it's psychologically draining, it's difficult, and it's not the way normal human beings are supposed to communicate. What I have found, and I've talked to other people, is more and more people want to have these kind of conversations where if we can't get it together face to face at work or over dinner or at church or whatever it is, that we can get together on Zoom or Facebook or one of these platforms where we can actually talk to each other. And the art of the conversation restores some of that ability to have give and take. I think that's crucial. We've got to restore that ability. And then actually having the conversation of listening to the other side and understanding where they're coming from. One of the things that's had me, upset lately is listening to some of the political discourse. If I listen to only people on my side describe what the other side is saying, it is so scary that it makes my stomach hurt. But when I talk to my friends who are politically on the other side on some issues, and they explain to me their reasoning, sometimes it makes me feel better. I get it. I see where you're coming from. That's not so scary. And then, in fact, let's talk about the 3 or 4 places within that conversation we actually agree, and stop yelling at each other and work on those things we agree. But if we're not actually having the conversations with the other side, instead we're just shouting at each other on Facebook or Twitter, we're not making any progress. So having more conversations like this, and I'll throw out the plug. The organization that I've joined, that I'm going through some training right now, is called Braver Angels. It's a national organization. They have a blue person and a red person, a Democrat and a Republican, for every leadership position. And their premise is restoring civil conversation and having patriotic empathy. We are all Americans on the same team, but we don't always agree. How can we talk to each other without getting mad? It's a national organization. I'm doing volunteer work for them. I'm going through training right now to get to be a moderator for some of their programs. I think it's going to be wonderful. I've also started having some more video chats like this with just some friends about other ways that we can talk, where I got together a group of people who are politically diverse just to talk through some issues so we would understand the issues. And we may do something with that other group going forward. But it's kind of like this, where we can actually have a conversation. You can't do that on Facebook or Twitter or whatever.
No, you have the battle of the tennis match of headlines. See, I'm right. No, see, I'm right. And what the issue I have, and I think, if you sit in the middle of the road, you get run over. So I'm not saying you got to be wishy-washy, but I also think that if somebody is on the other side of the street and you see a wreck, your perspective of the wreck is going to be different than mine. It doesn't mean it's not valid, and it doesn't mean there's not some fault in both the ways we saw it. It just means that it's good for whoever's trying to examine how we're at this place. It's good for people to step back and go, let's listen to both, because the truth, again, is somewhere in there. And I asked Eric this, John, and then we'll wrap this up in the next 5 minutes if you're okay with it, because I just want to tease what's coming. But I asked this on Eric because he was on Marketing Mix Radio with me this past week. You both have said this, and I don't think people make the connection. We want to bridge the gap of, yes, we talk about we the people, why we started the country, how we did it, and how we can interact with it. But there is a component of how this affects business on an everyday level too that we're not going to neglect. We're going to have some business other than you two. We're going to have other business voices on to talk about that. And a lot of people listen and go, the founding of the country, running my widget company, I'm busy. But that's a direct correlation.
Well, the small business owner is the largest employer in America. It's not the Fortune 100, 500 companies. The small business owner makes up 97% of all employees in America. And as Eric said earlier, they've been head down, plowing through, just trying to survive. I don't know how many business owners that I know have sold their boats, their motorcycles, cars, a home, just to pay the bills and stay in business through this process, because their employees mean that much to them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the regulations that have been put forth in the past 50 years that are strangling small businesses, those are things we need to be talking about, because they are real, they matter, and they are hindering growth in America.
Well, and I think I just saw, as of this recording, I heard a statistic where I think so far 15,000 restaurants in the United States have gone out of business for good. Like that's you know how this wave works. Whatever we're seeing now, there's more to come. Because everything kind of, lags a little bit. And just locally, we are starting to see businesses like one of my favorite places, Songbirds, shutting down, going out of business. And and if businesses are doing that now, trust me, they've done exactly what you said they've done, John. They've scraped every dime together. They've tried to get every loan. They've done everything. And so if they're actually shutting their doors and closing the door to that dream, that's a sad thing.
I went by Sticky Fingers over Hamilton Place the other day, and I saw that for sale sign. And I said, it just hit me. And every sign I see, but when you've been in an establishment, you've used it, eaten there, been serviced by, and all of a sudden it's gone. Not only do I feel pain for that business owner, but every employee, because not only those employees affected, but their households are affected by it.
Yeah.
And I think, this domino effect that's being allowed to be tolerated in America right now, not with just the pandemic, but there's this domino effect that's been going on for decades. And the people that it impacts daily, U.S. citizens, we the people, need to finally understand that there needs to be a line that's drawn that says, stop, let's call time out, let's figure this out so we can go another 250.
I am looking forward to these conversations. Again, it's why the country was founded. It's the expectations we should have as we move forward. And it's going to be, how we're going to get there through this series is conversations with each other, ideas, probably some uncomfortable conversations, and inviting other voices that may agree with us and may disagree with us to come on and be part of it. So I'm pretty excited about it. And I appreciate you two guys kind of letting me be the, I will represent the not Erics and Johns of the world and all the other smart people that we bring on. We really need a dumb question. Clint, this is a good time for you to shine, sir. Why don't you ask something?
And look pretty while you're doing it.
Well, I'll go with this last story, John, and you'll appreciate this. So, and I've told this so much, Eric's going to go, why are you telling the story again? Because a lot of people haven't heard it. So me and him are taking a trip. This is years ago, probably 7-8 years ago. I don't travel, and I don't spend money because I don't, anyway, whatever. So he says, hey, you're going on this little trip with me. So we're going on this little trip. We're in this van, and there's about 4 or 5 of us. And he's asking about my dad. My dad served in Vietnam. He was airborne, and he was in some just bad places. He was just in some bad places. A lot of people were in that time. My dad was in Vietnam, I think, a month before his 17th birthday. Before his 18th birthday. And he was not given the choice to go. So anyway, he served 3 full terms. So Eric asked me, hey, did your dad ever, was he ever in this? And Eric, you might even remember.
The Yaw-Drang Valley.
Thank you very much. So my dad at the time did not text at all. Zero. Hated it. So I text him knowing that I would not get a response for a while. Hey, were you ever in the, and I asked Eric, how do you spell that? And he told me, and I sent it. And my dad's called me immediately because he ain't texting. He goes, what's up, Bubba? I said, not much. Were you ever there? He goes, yep. I said, bad place? He goes, hell on earth. I said, okay. He goes, who are you with? I go, what do you mean? He goes, there's no way you know how to spell that correctly. So who are you? And I said, Eric Buchanan. And he goes, love you. I said, love you. Bye. So that just shows that will probably permeate. That kind of relationship will probably come out in these videos and podcasts. So with that being said, I think our next.
And just for anybody watching this, just for historical context, the Yaw-Drang Valley is the battle that was featured in that movie with Mel Gibson. We Were Soldiers Once and Young. So anybody who's seen that movie, that was the first major conflict at the beginning of the Vietnam War. And it wasn't there wasn't just one battle, but that was the first battle there, in case anybody was wondering. And I've met a couple veterans who were there, and it was that was a tough time.
And let me add that to that. If you've not seen that movie, you need to watch that movie, because it is really clear in that movie that an officer and an NCO can work together to lead their men, and at the same time have compassion for what they're not only been through, but going back and telling their wives after they've been through it. It's an amazing movie.
Well, and it's a great way to end it, because that's exactly what you both have said. It's about leadership, right? Leadership matters, and instilling the confidence for your subordinates sometimes to ask questions and push back. And, it's how that whole thing is supposed to interact. So it's a great movie. This has been a good video, and I look forward to next week. We're going to do one a week. So everybody stay tuned. Yes, we'll have an official name next week. And I've got a good topic. So if just to tease it, we will be talking about the Constitution a little bit next week. I know that's one of our first topics. So with all that being said, John, Eric, thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Clint. Good job.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See y'all next week.